but I won't come on until 6. All right. All righty. It's Pensacola Network. Let's get this show on the road. All righty. How are you there? Hello,
Talking to
Robin.
me? You
Yes, I'm
talking?
talking to you.
You
Yes,
talking to me? You don't want to say how are you there, beautiful woman, smart lady?
of course. Yes, yes, yes.
I just made all that up. I don't know. I don't say that about myself.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Pensacola Network. We have a great program lined up for you tonight. And I hope all the folks are coming over from the networking to the stage and to, to get to see what's going on here. We had a few new people in the networking last night, tonight. So we're excited about that. Got an opportunity to meet a few people, so new people, and we wanted to welcome George Bridges. He's new to Pensacola, and glad he could join us tonight, and we could make some connections there. All righty, I want to start off with thanking our sponsors, our founding sponsors. They've really been great. They've uh, all back on board for this year after we finished our started our 8 years of networking. I think we're probably on our 90th consecutive event now, so that's pretty fantastic, and we're excited about that. But we're excited about the community and all the folks that are supporting our efforts. So uh, Mike, if you want to, you can come on, and Robin, you can kind of go over some of your announcements as well.
Yeah, we're really grateful to the sponsors who have since 2013 really made this work so that people can come in and just straight up networking and enjoy each other around food. And so it's good for the soul in a couple of different ways. The food is good for the soul, but the networking and connecting with people is really good for the soul. And so we're grateful. And we're grateful to, and those are the corporate sponsors and the individual sponsors
Oh yeah,
too.
we have some
Individual,
small business
yes,
sponsors and corporate
that's
sponsors
right.
as well. We sure
That's right.
appreciate that.
Yeah, just as important. And the people who come every month and share, and even through this last, I guess since what, March of last year, and then we went back with our had a really good time
Oh
in July
yeah,
for
yeah,
the for the celebration. That was absolutely amazing. And I just want to give again a special thank you to Polian and Palimbatry and all the amazing musicians who came and shared their heart and their creativity with us, and all of the sponsors who provided door prizes. And it was just so amazing and so fun and so good to be back in person. Uh,
Yes.
and so now you see we're back online because things sort of took a turn to the left, to the left. Everything we wanted in the box to the left. I was just channeling Beyonce. I don't know. Is that Beyonce? To the left, to the left. Everything you, okay, all right, stop singing. So we're back online because we want to be safe. That's
Yes.
the bottom
Yes. Yes.
line. Yeah, we want to be safe. And so yeah. So speaking of that, just want you guys to think about the folks over in so speaking of safe, brother, let me say that all of the folks who we've lost again, just continue to lose. It's just such a tragedy. Just talking to Tom, our special guest, about that, and how people are kind of finally figuring out that that there is a way forward with this. And so unfortunately, some tragic things are happening that make people turn back to the science and the sense of it all. And so we just want to encourage you to be safe, and we want you here on the other. We want all of us here on the other side of this. So all those people who lost people and who are struggling with COVID, we just send you prayers and thoughts. And then those souls in Afghanistan, we are. We're often seen as around the world as a force for good, and sometimes that these things happen in war and tragedy, and so we just want to be very prayerful and thoughtful to all those U.S. Soldiers and civilians and the Afghanistani people who were in the midst of this tragedy. We just want to send you a special prayer and just let you know we're thinking about you and all of those who are involved in that.
I
And
agree. Yes.
yeah.
I agree. Who's this young man you got on stage with us today?
Okay, well, two more things. Wait a minute before I bring Mike up. Two more things. I know I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll. One, I know. One, one thing is because we're still in this pandemic and people are still having challenges. Just know that Fannie Finkley and Pensacola Caring Hearts are still there to help with food, and Reverend Sylvia Tisdale is there every day helping to feed people who are homeless and hurting. And so just make sure that you support them, and if you need their services, please do that. And so I think that's it. I'm going to bring up Mike because here we are talking about tragedy and this pandemic, and our good friend Mike. I told you I'm country Mike. I always say Arbrouet.
You got it. There's
Arbrouet.
there's a slightly R at the very beginning, but you got it right. It's like
Arbrouet.
boy. Boy.
Okay, okay, so y'all have it in the chat box there. This is Mike's country cousin here. Mike is originally from Haiti and has made a wonderful inroad in the nonprofit world here. He's a tech person by day, scientist and tech person by day, and his heart is still between these two countries of Haiti and America. And so, Mike, thank you so much for being here. And with all of the tragedy that Haiti has seen with the president, the unfortunate assassination of the president, and all of these natural disasters or unnatural disasters that we've had, can you just share the work that you're doing, and then we'll lead into how people can help.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to you guys for the thoughts. Right after the earthquake, I'm no longer doing much of social media. Got a handful of people reached out to me, and you guys were one of this group that shows where your hearts are, and that means a lot to me. So I just want to thank you for inviting me tonight. To there's no news story about what happened. It's just been tragic, natural disasters, political disaster. So it's been very costly to the people living on that island. And keep in mind, this is a beautiful place, surrounded by beautiful water and beautiful people inside and out. Just been tragic. The events that have been taken place. Um, one after another. And it's whenever I talk to people about Haiti, I say, hey, keep in mind, this is the first Black republic. Um, Louisiana would not be part of the U.S. without the Haitians. You talk about any other places where Black people realize it's time for us to be free. They had to learn from a guy named Toussaint Louverture, which is and Jean-Jacques Dessalines. They have to learn from all these great Black liberators, guys with hearts, and such a proud history there. So yeah, so back in August 14, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck the southwest portion of the island. This is actually a place where my mom is from. Not yeah, about 70, 80 miles from there. That's where the epicenter was. So very tragic. Um, I think it's about 2,000 um, lost their lives. So um, that was very sad and sad watching. I know a lot of organizations together to help. So to answer your question, what do I do? How do 4 years ago we started a nonprofit. We started going back to Haiti, doing um, an annual cybersecurity conference. I'm a cybersecurity professional. So way to give back is bringing back some speakers. So my brother and I, um, uh, we started the first cybersecurity conference. Was aiming the young people because there's a skills gap in the game, the cybersecurity field. So wanted to make sure that if there's any opportunities to get young people on that island, to benefit from anything is by educating them, by sharing the skills and knowledge that we have. So that's what we did. It was costly, um, you know, doing out of pocket. Every time I come back, my wife asked for the receipts, so I had to show her the receipts, and she wasn't pleased with that. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we decided to to see how we can get people to assist with that. And we started a nonprofit, Haiti CyberCon. So the goal there is to just educate, bring opportunities to mostly the young people, very smart. We got many success stories coming out of these trips we made to Haiti. We got guys now with certifications working for a company here or company there, due to the fact that they know somebody that looks like them, that's not coming back to for any reason but to help. Because if you can leave your family on a trip overseas, they know that you care. So, and that's important. So this is what we do. This is how we plan to help. Now I know there might be another question. How can people help? I'll let you.
Yeah, so
That's a third.
I just want to talk about the importance of that. So you're talking about cybersecurity, but that goes right to technology. And so when the earthquake hit, when those storms hit, then that physical infrastructure was challenged too. And so
Yeah.
providing the service that you do as a nonprofit would then help. And I know at this time it looks like don't people need food and water and that kind of basic level of survival, but even still, there are skills, as you said, that are needed to help put that infrastructure back into place so
Yeah.
we can communicate. I have a dear friend who's there, and I've been sending him texts and prayers, and have not heard back from him. Him and his wife there, who's a doctor there, and have not heard back from them. And so I'm just keeping the hope out. But I think that is a challenge when you lose that communication. So
Yeah.
the unknowing is just as challenging as trying to figure out how you can help. So tell us. I think you posted in the link you posted, and maybe on Facebook Live as well, your website, so people can go to see how to connect with you and other Haitians and Haitian Americans who
Yeah.
are directly impacting. Who are doing direct service to those on the island and on the
Yeah,
island.
and the one thing I want to make clear, right now, yes, there are some, you know, lots of organizations down there doing helping, but it's the immediate, it's the urgency because the cameras are focused on the plight of what's going on. I think but after the cameras are turned off, there will be long-term work that needs to be, and this is where what we focus on. We focus on the long term, educate, building this portion first. Because if we can equip young people to understand where to look for opportunities, that's something that's ought to be taken away. So we understand that portion. And then I posted two links. One link is a Facebook link. It's a guy that used to be the prime minister of Haiti, Laurent Lamotte, somebody that I respect. He had given a list of organizations that are doing, work on site, that are validated work, I call it that way, where the money is not going to go to some sort of um, administrative steps. There's a cut for this CEO, a cut for the CTO. Money goes directly to the people that need the help. So that's what I post that link. So this is not even related to what we do. I just wanted to give people a chance to see. Yeah, if you really want to help, you want to help an organization that's doing some work on site, you can pick somebody from that list. But the second link is our website. Right now we're working on two projects. And the first one,
HaitiCyberCon.com.
It is cybercon.com. We have two projects we're working on. The first one is we kind of we're building the skeleton of that. If you hear any background noise, that's my youngest son, so don't worry about him. He's crazy. So
We're trying to maneuver this thing.
The first project is just like you said, you were trying to reach out to your friend and you're not making contact. So right now we have a plan to start what we call a community internet service, where we are communicating, engaging some actors here in the States that can help us with providing internet infrastructures for small communities that can be replicated, in different parts on the island. So that's the first project working on. Once we get all the skeleton built, the architecture of that project, then we would post it on the website. But the second project, which is pretty dear to my heart, this one we're ready to publish it and ask for funding. We got the project manager that working on it with us right now. Is a security operations center.
Okay.
And that is closely related to the cybersecurity conference we've been doing. So what we've done, we've identified 30 young people, that we are doing. They're going to boot camps. We're paying for them to go to boot camps to get a certification, whether it's a certified ethical hacker, security plus, and some other very key low key certifications. So once they go to that training, we have right now we have a plan to build a small infrastructure, physical infrastructure somewhere outside of the capital, where we can have it's like a call center. These young people will be trained, and then they will be able to triage T1 support tickets, cybersecurity related. So they will get paid for the work they do. And if they cannot solve this problem, they escalate to a tier 2. So this is the project that we know that can make a life-changing differences in these young people's life, because they're ready for that.
Yeah. So they can find all of that information about both of those projects on your website at HaitiCyberCon.com. And those are two words I never thought I'd see together: ethical and hacker. Not my world.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
You have to try it out. I was watching Catch Me If You Can, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, but they ended up using him, I guess, apparently at the FBI or CIA after, because he could look at all of the bank fraud things. So you never know what challenges turned around. So Mike, thank you so much for coming on. Our prayers continue
Thank you.
Be with you and your family and friends who are there in Haiti, as well as the whole country in this extended mourning period for the president. Hopefully the first lady continues to recover
Yes.
in good health, and then what's next for the country. I've been on some conference calls with some of the women around the state of Florida, and so you can see the different communities really helping and figuring out in their sphere how to help. So thank you so much again, Mike's.
Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. Mike's information is in the link, so we appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mike. We'll see you later. All righty, are you ready to get the show on the road?
I am. I'm going to invite Tom up here, and while we're doing that, I did want to make sure that that I talk about Ron Ellington, our dear friend of almost 10 years now, who passed about a month ago. And in his struggle with cancer, and he would not mind me saying that because he was a fighter. And but Ron was really a fighter for equity and diversity in the tourism around Escambia County. And of late, he helped with the push for the Escambia Children's Trust. So he made his transition, and he was a great supporter of the Pensacola Network. And just want to thank his family and in the spirit of Ron for everything that he did for this community, and so many others too around the country, New Orleans and Georgia. And so we'll be celebrating his life this weekend. If this hurricane stays away from us, we'll be doing that. So.
All righty. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, glad to have you here. And I saw you on another video somewhere. You did a good job. So I think you can.
Well, let's just watch that.
I used Google and I searched your name, and this video came up, and you were the star of the video.
Tom's a star wherever he goes.
Wherever I go,
That's it.
Well, not sitting next to this one.
Yeah, that's it. This one too. Yes, this one too. Your star sitting next to this one.
This
That's
is
right.
getting awful bright in here.
That's right.
All right. Well, I'll let you two have it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ray. And again, just to remind people to go to Mike's the links on Facebook Live and hop in and LinkedIn, and to thank Chris Hendricks with Bantucola for making all of that possible and available, so that as we went back virtual, he was right there with us to stream live. So thank you so much, Chris Hendricks. We appreciate you. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Rob.
Hi, and welcome to the Pensacola Network for August. This is everybody in the virtual sphere clapping because you're here and because we are here together. Yay.
I'm clapping in my heart.
Are you clapping in your heart? All right. That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm going to remember every time you say something that I love your wife. I love your wife. I love your wife. Renee is fantastic. So welcome to the August edition of Pensacola Network. And, we each have a history. We each have a past, and in sharing that, our past and our history, there is some good, some bad, and some ugly. And it's important, from my perspective, it's important to share all of that. And my special guest is Tom Garner. Tom is a local historian and a researcher and I always say an archaeologist, because you dig it, brother. That's a bad joke. Okay, bad. That's pretty bad. A local historian, a researcher, archaeologist. I'm just going to put that title on you. And you may know Tom's name from Tom Garner's name from uncovering the DeLuna site, one of the DeLuna sites back in 2015. 2015, and then last summer he penned the letter that publicly uncovered this, as we say, a well-known secret that T.T. Wentworth and had close connections to the Ku Klux Klan. Tom revealed in a letter to City Council that was published in the Pensacola News Journal that T.T. Wentworth was in fact the Grand Dragon,
No, it'd be Exalted Cyclops at the local level.
the Exalted Cyclops for the, he was a big deal.
It was the leader of the local clan.
Of the local Ku Klux Klan in Escambia County, and had statewide, or attempted to have statewide influence in that. And then some ugly things happened. So the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. So I am excited to have Tom here. I often say that he's my twin. Sometimes he claims me, sometimes he doesn't. So please welcome, please welcome Tom Garner to it. So I have one question on my paper, and then we're going to have a conversation.
So I get out of here with only one question?
Nope, not at all. I didn't say that. I said I have one question on my paper.
All right.
Because people want to know about you, this problem and the possibilities, or whatever we're talking about. And so I penned the title of this as Revealing His Story, Revealing History. And so did you find history? And let's go back. So did you find history, or did history find you? How did you get to liking history? And I'm going to close my book.
All right. Well, I've always been interested in history since I was a kid. You know, you go on vacation and go see historical sites and national parks and that kind of stuff. But what really got me into local history, I was must have been 18 years old, and some friends and I were playing football at a local school, just messing around. Yeah, after hours, you know, it wasn't on the weekend, you know, we weren't official or anything, we were just using the football field. And I got bored with the football, and so I wandered down behind the school where there was this clay pit. This is up in Brent. And in the bottom of that clay pit was an old bottle from the Haiti Coca-Cola Bottling Works, the same company that's here today, only the bottle dated from, 1900, 1910. But I didn't know that at the time. And so, back in those days, this is going to be, 1981 or so. If you found something like that, you inevitably took it to the Old Christ Church, which at that time was the Pensacola Historical Museum. And so it was the face, kind of the face of local history.
Okay.
And the person in charge down there was a curator named Norman Simons, and he told me about the bottle and what it was, and took time to have an interest in me and what I'd found. So every little piece of junk I found after that, I'd take down and show Norman, and I started hanging around downtown, and when they would, disturb the soil, you'd find pottery, or you'd find glass or metal objects or whatever, and I would take it in there, and sometimes it was something interesting, and sometimes it wasn't, but he'd always take the time to show me. And then eventually...
Well, what age were you? So you said this is 80?
I'd have been 18,
okay.
19, something like that, probably 18. And he eventually started, the museum would get research requests. People would actually write letters back then because there was no email, there was no texting, and you'd get a request, my grandfather supposedly did such and such, can you help me figure it out? Or, we own this building, can you help me figure out the history, or things like that. So he'd ask me, so, well, you want to do some research? And he'd sit me down at the microfilm back before internet, and or sit me down with the files, or send me to find this book or that article. And he was teaching me how to research, how to do history. And that's how I came to do all this.
Did anyone subsequent to finding this bottle, did anyone in your family, was anyone interested in history? Was there this kind of genealogy of historians, or nosy people, as I say?
I think everybody in the family is interested in history to some degree.
In your family?
Yeah, my family. Not as much as I was, although my mother, when she retired, did volunteer for some archaeology projects with the University of West Florida. Okay. My father did, dabbled in family genealogy and that kind of stuff. So there was some interest there, yeah.
Oh. And so how did you see this as a career going forward because of your interactions with
I wasn't thinking about career at that age. I just loved it, To me, it's always just been a fascinating thing that you can learn about the past and people that lived 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 years ago. And to me, the archaeology aspect of it is you can actually hold objects that they held. Yeah. That's just crazy to me. Yeah. Like who made this and who used it and what was their life like and what did they think and so forth. It's just a fascinating thing to me. It always has been. I never lose that fascination with it.
And at our house back home, we have 3 pieces of wood that came from my grandfather's house in 1869. And so it's so cool to have those pieces of wood, no paint on them or anything. The house was being demolished, and because it had grown into a state. And the family, we still have the property still in the family, but it's so cool to have those and to touch those and to see, or to kind of think of what might have happened. So that physical aspect of history is so important.
Right.
Yeah. So then move forward. So this is when you were 18, and then you were still dabbling in history. Did it ever become a profession, or when did it become a profession? I guess.
Well, it became a profession somewhat in the early 1980s. I worked for the University of West Florida. My title technically at that time would have been a archaeological field and lab technician, which meant that I could work in a field setting, excavating, or in a lab setting, processing artifacts under the supervision of a qualified archaeologist, which I've done many, many times. And then,
this is some Jurassic Park stuff, huh?
No, Jurassic Park is actually paleo. Dinosaurs are paleontology, Rob.
Well, I mean, with the brush and the bones, right?
Well, sometimes it's that. Yeah. Usually we use a trowel. And sort of cut the soil, and we're looking for stains and things that represent, where a foundation for a building might have been, or where a trash pit was located. That, trash pit is like a little time capsule. They dig a hole, they bury a bunch of trash, and cover the hole back up, so it represents a very, specific moment in time. And it was trash to them, but the artifacts that we find in that trash pit, by re-excavating it and keeping it as an intact unit, it's like a little time capsule that tells us, a little bit about what their life was like.
And this is obviously before this whole advent of public utilities and things like that. Well, now we have trash collection, so that
Right.
you end up losing some of
it sets
some
up
of that.
it sets up a different thing. And there are some archaeologists that actually do, trash dump archaeology, and you don't get that.
What do you mean trash dump?
They go
archaeology?
excavate in landfills. There's that famous thing about that somebody excavated a landfill somewhere, and there was still a preserved hot dog in there that was 30 years old or something. Anyway, tells you about hot dogs. I love hot dogs, but
Yeah. That brings up the hot dogs, the Twinkies, the some of the fast food burger things. Yeah. So it becomes so. Fast forward to the DeLuna. That was part of that work as well.
Well, no, I was just, I wasn't working for the university at the time. I was just kind of bumping along. One of the things that I've enjoyed doing is locating archaeological sites. It's kind of a challenge, to figure out where things are. And I've located dozens and dozens of archaeological sites, both individually and in conjunction with other people at the university. But this was a big one. This one kind of caught me off guard. I was just driving through the neighborhood where the site is, and they had torn down a house from the 1950s, which is very common these days in historic neighborhoods, where they're tearing down older houses and putting up new houses that are larger and so forth. And I knew this was a possible spot for the location of the Luna site. And so I stopped and had a look, and there was, artifacts on the surface of the ground.
Wow. That's because it had been disturbed from the demolition.
Right.
Wow.
So the soil was exposed, and artifacts showed up. Yeah.
So let me go back to the title, Revealing His Story. How do you decide, and this is more personal than maybe professional, how do you decide what to share? How do you, because the field is wide and deep, and as you said, you went from, if I say, then you're digging, then there's paleontology, so digging up a specific thing. There's so many different deals. How do you decide what to kind of reveal and share? And then we'll move forward to the
Well, what's
KKK
interesting, Norman Simons, the curator of the Pensacola Historical Museum in Old Cross Church, that was one of the wonderful things about Norman. He would share whatever he knew with anybody, regardless. He would make some exceptions, like if there was a very sensitive archaeological site somewhere that you didn't want people going and digging it up or something.
Sure.
He wouldn't do that. But in general, Norman would share what he knew. And he instilled that value in me. And I think it's super important because what I've found is that when I share, I get as much or more back, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's probably people that would wish I'd shut up about it. I'll talk to anybody about any aspect of history that they want to talk about. You know, I enjoy it, you know, archaeology or history or whatever.
So I've been I've been nosy for a long time, and no comments in the deal about that. My self-awareness here. But particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, my interest in Belmont de Villers and the local African-American history, it's interesting how when I'm talking to people that there is this sort of hesitancy about what to share. I think to frame a particular narrative so that, you know, you don't want to make grandma or grandpa look bad, or, you know, you want to, you know, do you want to share, do you want to tell the truth or do you want to tell the whole truth?
You're talking about the ugly.
Not necessarily. I mean, it could be bad and it could be ugly. Yeah. And there may be some good things too that someone got. And like you said, so to your point about Norman Simons, that there may be something good that they don't want to share, that they want to hold on to because they don't want to make public or don't want to have somebody going to digging into. Have you run across that where people are hesitant to share?
Well,
and then we'll get to the bad and ugly.
Well, I mean, you know, well, yeah, there's always researchers that, you know, they just keep stuff very close to the vest. And, you know, I guess they're afraid people are going to steal it from them or whatever. I just never had that fear. Maybe if you're in a position where you're, you know, writing articles or going to write a book or whatever, and you're worried somebody's going to take your work. I just never thought of it that way. I don't view things that way. And to each his own, I suppose.
Well, I think I've found, and I, you know, sort of, you know, honest with myself, I found that sometimes I am hesitant to do that, but then I think someone shared it with me, right? Yeah. So, but then also, and then also that someone can look at it differently. So I may have been looking at this artifact or this article or this photo, and then someone comes along and sees something different. To me, that's the benefit.
Well, you know, you get it's a really interesting thing to get a group of archaeologists or a group of historians in a room together, and you just start talking about history, and it's amazing the things that come up that you didn't know or didn't think about. And it's like we all bring pieces of the puzzle, and if we don't get together and talk about it, we don't ever see the full puzzle or as complete a puzzle as possible. You know, to me, it's always been just a really neat thing to share with others.
We have a mutual friend, Teniade Brodden, who I knew as a historian and archivist, the first archivist I've known, and here the first archivist I knew here in Pensacola, and then, you know, historian, researcher, and now city council woman. But we have this kind of running joke that if African American, well, they had something to do with Belmont de Villers from my perspective. And from her perspective, they had something to do with Allen Chapel. But it is interesting to see, and usually both of us are right.
But yeah, in a small town like Pensacola, that's very possible.
It is very interesting how people gain their perspective because of their experience, and then, you know, and then share it from that particular perspective. Because I know she's done amazing work with the history of Allen Chapel and those people who came out of the church and influenced Pensacola, just like I've done with Belmont de Villers. And we both are standing on shoulders of other people who have shared this. So let's get to the ugly and the bad.
All right.
So last summer, after we went through, as I said, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many others, we were in this whole pandemic mode. And then we had all of these racial challenges and killings. And then the conversation really intensified after that in Pensacola, as it did in a lot of cities, particularly in the South, around these monuments, these huge visual representations of this particular time period that most people come to find out was an afterthought from from the time. And you penned a letter to city council because they were getting ready to make that decision about removing the monument. The mayor had his thoughts about it, city council had their thoughts about it, and you penned this letter, a very public letter that was then printed in the Pensacola News Journal. What made you, in your heart, reveal that story?
Quint Studer. Quint Studer wrote a letter to city council. It was June, I think, saying that we should take the Confederate monument down. And his perspective was that it basically made us look like a bunch of jerks. Bad for business, bad for the community. It's time to, not have this anymore. And he was right. Of course he was right. And his letter was published in the News Journal as well.
In June.
I think it was in June, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my letter was in July 12th. And I thought to myself, well, okay. Because, I was moved by the George Floyd thing. How could you not be? I don't recall the thing. It was a murder.
Sure, yeah.
It was a George Floyd murder.
I get you.
And I was moved like everybody else, but, pandemic's going on. There have been protests, but I don't want to go down there because there's a pandemic going on. And, and then the Confederate monument issue comes up again. It had been several years previously that it had come up before where, there were actually large gatherings of people at the monument, both pro and con, and people trying to get the city council to go ahead and take it down. Because as you say, it's not representative of history. It's an afterthought. It's not even accurate. It doesn't tell the full story of what the Civil War was about, and so forth. And I heard it commented that removing that monument would be erasing history. And I'll be honest with you, it made me mad because I've been researching history here in Pensacola for 40 years now. And my specialty has not been what we might term Black history. And we can talk about that in a minute. But I knew enough about local history to know that there was actual history that had been erased. And it was the history, what I'll call the history of race and racism. The interaction of the white community and the Black community through time, beginning in 1559 when Tristan da Luna stepped on shore with enslaved Africans, all the way up through the present, right? And it's a history that we don't talk about. It has been erased by and large.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say, and to Jeremy Samuel's point, because he was making that point very passionately in an earlier conversation, that even the Native Americans before that. So even those who were on this land prior to thousands of years prior to that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whose story had not been told.
Yeah, there's a lot of ugly to go around. And anyway, so I thought, it's time, if Quint Studer, who's not even from here, can stand up and say something about this monument, then I need to, because I'm from here, I'm a local person, I understand this history from a local perspective thoroughly. I've probably been to the Confederate monument, or what used to be the Confederate monument. I couldn't even tell you how many times over the years, many, many more times than the folks that were in support of keeping it there. So I understand this very, very well. And I felt like it would be irresponsible if I didn't say something about it. So I decided I would, do what Quint Studer had done. I'd write a letter to the city council and say, hey, based on what I understand about the history of this monument, I think you guys ought to take it down. And then it occurred to me that it's not enough,
It's not enough to write, or it's not enough
It's not enough just to take that monument down. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's the right thing. I'm convinced of that. Nobody's more surprised than me that it actually happened. But I'm glad. It's a good thing. Good thing for the community. But I thought, there's a much broader history here than just the Confederate monument, and I know a lot of that history, and I had a responsibility, like I said in the piece that I wrote, to talk about this broad history that has been erased, that is basically out of sight, out of mind, that we don't talk about, or at least the white community doesn't talk about it. I can't speak for the Black community, whether the Black community talks about it or not. But the white community doesn't talk about this history. We're talking about, not just the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan is a small part of it. The Klan was in existence here in Pensacola in that 1920s version.
Well, let me stop you. Let me stop you there before we go there, because I think that's an interesting point, that both are not talking about it. So this kind of omission, but then this kind of commission thing. So kind of committing the story that provides this particular narrative of what the Black experience here was. And I think you and I have had this conversation several times before about the perspective of the African American history and experience here, that it's not all around this ism, race and racism, that there is so much other history, but it had been framed in this particular narrative intentionally, as you talk about both in the article and since I've known you about this experience where people are espousing this particular narrative, but then also this not talking about it. So you said, so Quint Studer is white and you're white. Newsflash.
Yeah.
And so here is the African American community, the Black, the Negro community, saying this the whole time. And I've had this conversation with other folks, other Black folks, who are saying, we've been saying to take that monument down, and to no avail. And then Quint writes a letter, you write a letter. And I said to you, and I promise you there's a question in here, I said to you, you were the best person to write that letter because you come from a particular perspective. As difficult as it was for some folks to swallow, you had all the, as my friend Dr. Phyllis says, accoutrements, the text. I love that word. Can't spell it, but I love that word. And so at the beginning of your article, you said, it's time. So, and again, that goes to my point that you said in your article that Norman Simons knew about this back in the 70s. People knew even before then, people who were still living today who knew this narrative. And so that is my point to this conversation about how we reveal our stories to frame a particular narrative. And how do you know that it is time? You said it's time. How do you know it's time? And then how do you honor those people who are, who have been saying, listen, this is wrong, pull this down, until it's time and a particular person says something and then people go, let's do it.
Well, I mean, to me, the thing about it being time is long past time, honestly. I mean, to me, it was just, it's a historical inaccuracy, that monument, and an affront to the Black community and segments of the white community that are well, you see what I'm saying. That was long past time. I wouldn't
even have put segments. I think it was an affront to the white community too, because again, it skews the narrative and it perpetuates this idea of history that is, or saying that we're erasing history, but again, it perpetuates this narrative that is incorrect.
Yeah, and I don't think that racism is good for the white community. I don't think racism is good for racists, and we're friends with.
It should be a bumper sticker.
Well, yeah, I don't think
racism is not good for racists.
My father was a terrible racist when I was growing up. He was also one of the most unhappy people I've ever run into. So I don't, if you're having to point fingers at somebody else as the problem, it means that you've got a problem that's unresolved yourself. I just think that's very clear. But and I don't consider that Tom Garner wrote this thing in the paper and that made the city council take the monument down. I don't think that's what happened. I mean, maybe it nudged a little bit, but there was a lot of nudging going on long before I came on the scene. And nationwide, there has been an ongoing movement to remove these monuments. With the George Floyd murder, it made it very clear some of the problems that we still have as a nation, as a community, in regards to racism. So it was part of a tide that was moving that way. And if I helped some, I'm very grateful for that, but I don't think it was the catalyst for it.
How did you know it was? And I'm still I guess that's still the question is, how do you know it's time? Again, revealing history, revealing your story. How do you know when it's time? Again, so 40 years ago, people knew this. 40 years before, people knew this. Does your heart say it's time? Is it a I've had enough, or
It's that. It's
is
that.
it,
Because it really irritated the hell out of me for people to suggest that this was erasing history. It's just absurd. It is absurd rewriting of history. I wrote in the piece that the monument itself was erasing history. When that monument was put up, it erased the role of the Black community of enslaved persons in the Civil War. There's nothing about that on that monument. And people will tell you that, well, it wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. Oh, baloney. Go read the newspapers right before the Civil War and you'll see what it was about. So that's just baloney. So that monument itself was erasing history. And a good historian, a good archivist, a good archaeologist, in those categories, wants the truth. It can be good truth, bad truth, or ugly truth, but you want the truth. That's the point of the whole thing. And that monument was not the truth in any way, shape, or form.
There is and I keep going to the heart, because I think when you're having this, it's only so much that the head can do. So these facts are the facts. But I think a lot of this, when we're sharing this history, as good as it is, as bad as it is, as ugly as it is, that I think that it really pierces people I think you said this, it really pierces people in their, or maybe I said, I don't know, we're twins. It really pierces people in their heart. And so they are trying to decide about sharing this information and then what it's going to appear to be. What was it when you, after you wrote the letter, what did you, or excuse me, after the letter was published, what did you think? Not what you did, but what did you think? What did you, was it a relief, or was it oh heck, or what?
I'll tell you, and I still feel it today. The strongest things just made me very, very sad that any of this history happened. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And I was involved I've been researching local history. I don't have a degree in history. I'm what I refer to as a local historian. Every community has us. We're just folks that get interested in it and fall in love with history, and we become very knowledgeable about it, right? So I don't want to claim a pedigree that I don't have. But I do know a lot about local history because I fell in love with it and started researching, and it's a lot of fun to me. And I researched local history for a long time without really looking hard or at all at this history. And I don't consider what we're talking about to be Black history, because that leaves out an element of it. This is Black history and white history. Right? This is white history as well, what we're talking about. And there's a whole category of history that is Black history, I think, that is separate from this. This is the interaction of the races through time, right? And that's what's important to me about this, because it matters, right? It still reverberates in the community today, the things that happened in the past. It's, so I'd run across things like, I can remember reading the newspapers, and you run across, lynch mobs and things like that. And for years and years, I would go, ooh, I wouldn't even read the articles, because it's just, it's just uncomfortable stuff, it's gruesome stuff. And I've never cared for that. I'm not one to watch horror movies or, medical shows where they're cutting people open, that kind of stuff. So I would kind of avoid it. Then I got involved in a film project called Lily and Leander. And it was a woman named Alice Hurwitz, whose great-grandmother's sister was alleged to have been fatally assaulted by a Black man named Leander Shaw in 1908. And she died, and Leander Shaw was broken out of the jail and murdered by a lynch mob in Plaza Ferdinand. So Alice had heard the story through her family from her great-grandmother, or maybe her grandmother, and wanted to see if it was true. And she worked as a counselor at New York University Film School. And so she hooked up with a recently graduated student and made a film about this search for the family story. Was it true? What happened? And so forth. And so as part of that project, I was hired to research that, lynching and other lynchings in the community. And then I decided, this is important history. that needs to be researched, and I've continued to research things like sundown towns and that kind of stuff. History of racial violence in the Pensacola area, and I've worked on that off and on for almost 20 years now.
Which was just in the news, just in the news, how people are trying to intentionally integrate sundown. Just in the news yesterday, I think it was a story on NPR about how people are trying to intentionally integrate sundown towns. And so now there's this analysis going on to see if that intentionality is having an effect on the continued welcoming of African Americans and other cultures and ethnicities in these traditional sundown towns. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating.
I think that is very fascinating.
Yeah.
We've got our own sundown town. Well, there's various aspects of sundowning in the community. We've got sundown neighborhoods and sundown areas, but we've got one specific sundown town in this area.
Florida.
Up in northern Santa Rosa County, yeah. And I can give you the story on that if you want it. But so that's something else that I've researched as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you finish your answer?
I don't know. What was the question?
Okay. All right. No, no problem. So let me move past kind of the heart of this to, there were some repercussions. You felt some repercussions after this, and I'll let you decide about whether or not to go into that. My question on that is, sometimes when we share information, that not everyone will like it, either the methodology of sharing it, the intent of sharing it, or the consequences of sharing it. Not everyone is going to like that. Did any of that factor into your decision to share this? Did you think, what if, what will happen, why?
Sure. I had a discussion with my wife, Renee, about, I could lose my job because of this. And we decided that it was still the right thing to do. We had a conversation about how we could get a brick thrown through our front window. I mean, the Klan, they're less, prominent than they once were, but those attitudes are still out there, So you think about these things. I was not warned, but I was cautioned by friends and family members to be careful and so forth. So you think about these things, but at some point you got to think, okay, what is the right thing to do? I believe the university initially reacted badly to this, and there was a magazine article about this whole issue that came out a few weeks ago, and Rob Overton, the director of the University of West Florida Historic Trust, that's the organization that possesses the Klan documents, the Wentworth Klan documents. He was quoted as saying that when he, read my piece that ended up in the News Journal, that he felt like the sky was falling. And I don't want to tag this all on Rob. I think that was in general the feeling at the University of West Florida initially. And in my mind, I'm like, well, so why was the sky falling? To me, this is an opportunity to correct a historic injustice. We have the flagship museum of the University of West Florida, right on the public square, big, beautiful building where everybody can see it, named for not just the guy who cleaned up the chairs after the meetings, named for the head, the exalted cyclops of the local Ku Klux Klan. And there was document after document after document after document after document that showed his thought processes and how deeply he was involved in this. To me, that's an opportunity to do right. It's interesting. We talked about this whole Klan thing, Wentworth's involvement in the Klan being public knowledge or being known by people. And it's been known in the historical community, or at least segments of the historical community, for a long time. Norman Simons told me about it in the early 1980s. I've talked with other local historians that have said the same thing, that it's kind of common knowledge that Wentworth was involved in the Klan. I don't know if you remember this, but I asked you, this is before any of this became public, I said to you, if I were to ask you who was the leader of the local Ku Klux Klan, who would you say? And you immediately said, T.T. Wentworth Jr.? And I don't know why you said that. Maybe you don't know why you
No,
said
it was
that.
a well-known secret. I
Yeah.
mean, so even again, when
So-
I started with this information, I remember asking, he's deceased now, and, but I remember asking a gentleman about, I had a picture when I was researching about Belmont de Villiers, and I had a picture, and I presented to him, and I said, so, it's, can you talk about this, and he said, yo, you don't want to talk about that. And so there was this, and again, I didn't have any knowledge except for this again that we say is this well-known secret, this open secret.
Open secret.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that it was an open secret in the Black community, because you're not the only member of the Black community that I've talked with this about. Even before all this came out, there's just this rumors floating around about Wentworth,
Which does maybe go to, so I think that does go to in our families, and I will bring up the point about something that happened in our family, that the ugly that we're talking about. But it is interesting how we tolerate information until it is brought to light. Like we know information until it is brought to light. I was making a comment, I better watch the time here. I was making asking one of my elder sisters about one of our family names and why one of our grandfathers and his brother, or one of our great uncles, had two different last names. I said, well, did they have different fathers, which where you get your surname from, in general? Or she said, no, same father, same mother. And I said, so what happened? And she goes, well, to me, that I was like, oh. And so she said that it was said, through our family lore, that he killed someone, a white man. Don't know if it was in self-defense or anything other. And so then that he fled and changed his name. We don't know if that story is true or what. And I said, so our last name is this? And she said, well, so it is those secrets. And so I always say that while I'm not responsible for what happened, I am accountable to share that story or even that family lore, so that perhaps it can be investigated, maybe not by me, maybe one of my children or descendants, or that they can. But if we don't share that information, then we're again trying to frame something that perhaps did not happen, or control the ugly in each of our
control the ugly. I think that's it. And I
family.
think I think in some cases controlling the ugly, is nefarious. People are doing it and they know better. I think in other cases that it's just uncomfortable. As you said earlier, maybe it makes people who are our ancestors look bad, particularly if they're people that we knew and loved. That's hard. That's hard to understand or recognize that people that we loved and that loved us may be capable of attitudes or even actions that are horrendous. Yeah. And so it is a tough thing, but it doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to go ahead and look at this history. And again, to me, the piece that I wrote to the city council that ended up in the paper, a small part of it is about the Klan. Maybe, I don't even know if it's 10%. The point I was trying to make was that there's this larger history. It's not just the Klan. It's, murder by lynch mob. It's disenfranchisement. It's redlining. It's black codes. It's enslavement. It's, segregated schools, segregated hospitals, segregated neighborhoods, denial of access to business opportunities, denial of access to justice, over policing. It was this
under policing.
Whatever the right term is.
No, I'm saying that, both.
Yeah, and some of this is figuring out terminology as well.
Sure,
I mean, we're not there yet. We haven't figured it all out yet. And so it's this huge, massive historical context that affected everything else. There's no subject in history locally or anywhere that you can talk about in this country that wasn't affected by this idea of race and racism, the interaction of the white community and the black community. And that's just the way it was. You know?
It appears a dear friend and mentor, Honor Bell, said once about education that it is the drumbeat. So we were talking about economic opportunities, housing, health, and he said education is the drumbeat for all of that. I wonder in what you're talking about, this unveiling, this corralling or containing, or whatever I said about the ugly. If racism is that drumbeat, that in fact we may not know that we're espousing these racist attitudes, or either again by omission or commission that we're doing this, but that it is so entrenched in us that that we are keeping time with it, and over time it just becomes a part of our everyday thing, including what you said, redlining and missed opportunities.
We don't see it.
Yeah.
We don't see it. And particularly in the white community, we don't see it.
Or we don't hear it.
We don't hear it. Yeah, we don't recognize it because you grow up with what you're used to, and what you grow up with is what you're used to. So you don't, unless somebody points it out to you, unless you make an effort to see it in your own life, it is easy to just go along with it because it's what you know, right? I'll give you an example, and I don't necessarily want to pick on the University of West Florida, but I'm going to pick on the University of West Florida a little bit. The largest historical entity in this community is the University of West Florida. They've got a history department, they've got archives at the university, they've got an archaeology program, they've got the Archaeology Institute, Florida Archaeology Network, Public Archaeology Network. The Historic Trust operates the Seville District, Historic District, with all the houses and museums and so forth. They've got an archives that's probably the second largest archives. The University of West Florida is the historical entity in this town. I mean, there's others, but they're small and underfunded and often not recognized for the efforts that they do. So it's really appropriate for the university to address this history that we're talking about, this history of race and racism. It's uncomfortable. It can be difficult. I think it's good in the long run. I think it's the right thing in the long run. But I appreciate that it's not the easiest thing to do. Makes us feel like the sky is falling. When I wrote my letter to the city council last year on July 12th, to the best that I can figure, and that's me doing the research on this, the University of West Florida Historic Trust had 45 positions of responsibility in regards to history. That includes they've got a board of directors, they've got a board of governors, and they've got the staff. All right, so 45 positions. Rahman, out of those 45 positions, there were no members of the Black community. Right? And so one of the things that I've been tagged with as having not done correct.
This was as of last
July. Yeah,
okay.
There's now, as far as I can see now, there's one member of the Black community out of what I think is now 41 or 42 positions. I mean, that's just stunning to me. To have 45 positions of responsibility in regard to history, and there are no members of the Black community. That's just stunning to me. And, we've had this conversation. I don't think it's on purpose, right? And others might think differently. The term for this is systemic racism or systemic bias, right? And it's just, you get in, things have always been done this way, and we keep doing them that way. And to me, there's something wrong. I don't think anybody at the University of West Florida or the UWF Historic Trust is writing memos saying, how can we keep members of the Black community from participating? I don't think that's what's going on. But there's something wrong with the system in which persons who are going to be involved in local history in that organization are chosen. And there's some setting, there's something that is excluding participation of the Black community. And so you look at, the university, I think, is upset with me because I went public with the Wentworth documents without telling them first. And I thought about that. And I made the decision not to tell the university first because I understood from hearing from members of the Black community that the Black community does not trust the white community with its history. And why should they? Why should they? Mr. History was T.T. Wentworth, the head of the local Klan. you know?
Who was espousing a particular narrative.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the only one, and we've said that very publicly, that he wasn't the only one. He had about, what do they call it, a bully pulpit? He had a boom box, a bully pulpit to do that. Even long after he left this plane, he had that.
And so in looking at that situation, it's like I can give this information to the university. And some of these folks are my friends that I've known for years and years. I'm not saying they're bad people. They are not bad people. But at some point in the white community, we have to understand that we can't have this, paternalistic attitude, that, trust us, we'll do the right thing. And so I guess we're out of time since Lloyd's back.
Well, he'll be all right. He'll be all right for just a minute.
Okay,
Yes,
Lloyd?
trust me, he'll be all right for just a
Yeah,
minute.
all right. Yeah.
My point is, we've talked about how does this history get told. The university has an important role to play in this, and they've since corrected course some on this, but it's their responsibility to take on this full history and in a meaningful way, and that's not been done yet. But the first thing they've got to do is they've got to fix their diversity problem within their own organization.
Well, and again, and I know sometimes the timeline doesn't line. It's not the timing doesn't line up, but the name was changed from after this information. Right. Then it was changed from the T.T. Wentworth State Museum to the Pensacola Museum of History, which is a most apropos name, and very much kudos to them. And it was interesting, the discussion that was had in getting to that point, how you heard from these diverse opinions, and some of them did feel like, and this is Robin, not Robin the interviewer, this is Robin from a citizen and from a historian point of view, it did feel like that we were going backwards with some of the opinions that were shared. The thing that I appreciated about it was that it was done publicly, and so then it saw the light of day. So I've got two questions. What, before we close up, babe, I see you there. So we talked about the institution, but there's also the system and the individual. So what advice would you give to someone, this is going to be my first question, my last question is one I want you to end with. What advice would you give to someone who is sharing this, wanting to share a story based on everything that you went through? What advice would you give someone, whether it's a personal or institutional or systemic, in sharing the story? That's the first one, the advice. And then I'll hold my last one till the end.
I don't know that I'm one to give advice, but
it's like two eyes we all got.
My first advice is go ahead and do what you think is right. You'll feel better, but go into it with your eyes open, understanding that there may be pushback. And with this subject matter, there's always pushback, hard pushback, particularly in a small southern town like Pensacola. And I understood that was a real possibility, but do it anyway. That's what I would advise. It's funny. We're friends with, both of us are friends with Reverend Matthews, Reverend H.K. Matthews. And
Burnt Corn, Alabama. We were up there.
Yeah. And
he's not in Burnt Corn, but let me just say.
Well, he's pastoring a church.
Pastoring a church in Burnt Corn.
And so HK, you look at him and he's like this tough figure that took on the system and risked everything and lost everything and came out the other side. And he's just this. And I asked him the other day, he was in a car with some other pastors. He wasn't even a pastor at that time. They were headed from Pensacola up to, I think, Birmingham to meet with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To plot strategy. And I said to him, HK, what did that feel like to be in that car, to go up there to see Martin Luther King? He said, I was scared. And you think about the context. This was right at the time when the 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi had disappeared. Nobody knew what had happened, but you figured it was bad. And in that context, you can understand, I was scared. He was at the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis when John Lewis was injured. HK was injured. And I said, what was that like? He said, I was scared. And so what I take from that is that, there's that thing that says courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is going ahead anyway, even if you are afraid. So that's what I would suggest to people, is that do what you think is right to the degree that you can do it. even if you're afraid.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Would you do it again?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No question. No question. And I think about that. I think about the way it's played out. Would I do it the same way? And the answer is yes, I would do it the same way. And I don't mean any offense to the folks at the UWF Historic Trust, but I think I did it the right way. I think I did it the way that I had to do it. I couldn't just go behind the scenes and put this in their hands and trust them to do it, because the Black community doesn't trust the white community with its history, and I just couldn't see to do that. And we have to wrap our heads around that in the white community. We have to stop assuming that even though we're good people, even though we have good hearts and we're trying to be as benevolent as possible, it doesn't give us the right to make decisions on behalf of the Black community in regard to history or any other subject. We have to start empowering members of the Black community to make these decisions as part of the process, which means UWF Historic Trust, put members of the Black community into your organization. Now, just do it. So, off the soapbox.
Revealing his story, revealing your story. Well, thank you so much.
You had another question. Lloyd's going to kill us?
No. We're not a violent body. We're not a violent family. No, that was the last question. Would you do it again? Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, Tom, I don't get no respect, and you see what I have to go through.
You get mad respect. Don't say that. Don't say that. But please join me in thanking Tom Garner for sharing this.
We got at least one question, and I got a couple questions myself. Sylvia, I don't know if you can see that question, Robin, but I'll try to read it here. Is there any way to challenge an inaccurate narrative without conflict and some immediate negative repercussions?
Okay. Is there any way to challenge an inaccurate narrative without conflict and some immediate negative repercussions? Thank you. Okay.
I'm going to say no. When it comes to this subject, we're just entrenched in the way that we think about these things, and so risk averse. I just think there's always going to be a certain amount of pushback. I hate to say that. I don't like that. I don't think it's necessary. I think that everybody will feel better and we'll have a better community for everybody when we go ahead and examine the wounds, but a lot of folks don't feel that,
I was thinking of Malcolm X and his famous statement about pulling the knife all the way out, and some not even recognizing that the knife is there. And so her question is interesting, without conflict or some immediate negative repercussions. And I think it's certainly a valid question. I think people have some valid feelings, and you spoke about that there may be some repercussions because everyone's not going to applaud you for doing the right, or I guess I should say, or the righteous thing. That there will be people who say, you should have done it this way. You could have done it this way. You were trying to do it because you wanted something, or because you didn't want something, or you didn't tell the whole truth, or they're going to be people who have things to say.
And this wasn't just a spur of the moment decision for me. You can ask Renee, my wife. I wrestled with this for a solid month. I could hardly sleep. I could hardly eat, trying to figure out how to write this statement to the council and say what I wanted to say and what I felt needed to be said.
I do think it was very impactful. I did not read Clint's story. I had the benefit of seeing yours and having that conversation with you, even without reading the whole thing before it was published, and having that conversation with you and hearing through email. I don't know that we talked. I think that was the time when we lost our nephew.
That's right. Yeah.
But having that conversation with you, but really hearing your heart and the difficulty in hearing your heart about that. But I do think it is important for people for it to be recognized that these are two, and I know there were others, to white men. And often, so the one thing that is said in the Black community is that some folks think that white ice is colder. So that if I say something, if I say here's some ice and I'm giving it to you from my hand, some folks may say, well, Tom's ice is colder than mine. And so that there is this unfortunate believability when a white person says it versus when a Black person has been saying the same thing. And you can do that same line with women. A woman can say something and say, oh, here's the right and righteous thing to do, and then no one listens to her, and the man can come back and say, well, let's do this, and everybody goes, you're a genius.
I'll tell you a story about that. I shared what I wrote with half a dozen people, and you were one of the persons that I shared it with before I submitted to City Council, and I shared it with another member of the Black community who's a local historian, and I won't say who it was, but they read it, and we're friends, so I was starting to talk about all the blowback I was going to get for this, because you know it's coming, not from everybody, but from certain quarters, you're going to get blowback because this is, quote, controversial stuff, right? And she thought I was backing out. And I wasn't backing out. I was just moaning about what I knew was going to happen, or probably was going to happen. And she said to me, you have to do it. And I said, why? And she said, because you found the lunacite, they'll believe you. And I thought, it breaks me up to this day. I just, it hurts me to think that I've stumbled across this archaeological site. And as my wife tells me, and I'm also a white male of a certain age. And for those reasons, I'll be believed rather than members of the Black community who have had to live through this, history for generations and generations. That just stuns me.
Yeah.
But I got a question. Because I know you two can go on forever here. The bottom line is by sharing that letter and that getting in the paper, do you think it changed in any way the way Black people feel towards white people?
I have no idea.
I would say absolutely not.
Say your question again.
By him writing that letter and exposing that information, does it change the way Black people feel about white people? And I don't think no person's attitude changed or feelings changed. And I don't know what the fear is about telling the truth.
Yeah. I think that does go to what you said, Tom, about Lloyd's point. What you said about I think there is some truth in that, the Black community not trusting the white community with its history because of that narrative switch kind of deal, that code switching kind of thing. So two things. One, our a mutual friend, Dr. Wells, always says that the history is there. It's in the archives. It's there. Now, whether it's being shared is one thing. But the other thing that I always say is that it had not been valued, so that even people who would bring out, I talk to people who have these amazing personal archives, and I just spoke with one less than 2 months ago, and she said, I tried to provide this to the archives and they didn't want it. Yeah. And so it is this whole thing about value and being valuable and who and what is deemed to be valued. And there is this unfortunate hierarchy in America, I can't speak for any other country, in America, I think, of white men, white women, Black women, black men, and you can put any other race or ethnicity or culture after white men and white women, and unfortunately that's the way some people think. Instead of we're all here, they think hierarchical with who's important or who's more valuable. And I think that's, Lloyd, what your question for me goes to, is how Black folks have really, known this all along and accepted, and I'm generalizing here, accepted this truth of what's, who's appeared to be valuable, or we. Well,
yeah. So my point is, I'll kind of be blunt a little bit.
Be blunt. We need that.
Yeah. So Black people know how white people feel about it. So so the truth, all this truth coming out, it's not going to change the way black people feel about white people. And so so my point is, why keep worrying about, black people knowing about this stuff? It's not going to change the
Well,
way.
here's the answer. The answer is this: I didn't write this for the black community. I wrote
Yes,
this for the white community.
right,
Right?
right,
My intended audience. I've got nothing. I've got nothing to teach the black community.
yeah,
Right?
and that's
This
kind of what my
this
point is.
this
Is
was a
yeah,
white person speaking to the white community, saying we need to get our act together,
yeah,
and we
yeah.
do.
And that's kind of what my point is, that people are afraid for the truth to come out, and so black people want to know the truth, but that's not gonna make us go out and do something stupid. We already know what racism is,
Yeah.
and so it's not changing our perspective on racism.
And the tolerance level is high. I'll just say that. I do want to point out, Renee, your wife puts in the comment. I'll confirm that Tom did nothing but think about this letter and how to write it for a solid month. And I think thank you, Renee, for that comment, because I do think that there is this thing that when you reveal these stories, good, bad, and ugly, that there are more than the person who's affected and impacted by it, that our families are affected and impacted, and rightly so, because they're the ones who will surround us and love through that good, bad, and ugly of that. And yet they deserve to know just as well. Like my sister told me, the whole well thing. That's a whole
Well,
story.
I have this. I have this history in my family. None of my family members were members of the Klan, as far as I know, but they definitely in rural southern Georgia participated in racially motivated violence. They did because they told stories about it. My father told the story, and so you do have to say, well, what does this say about me, that I come from this family, and what does it say about these persons that I knew and maybe loved and so forth? It's a hard thing. It doesn't mean we don't look at it. Doesn't mean we don't do the hard thing. We do.
I think that goes again to the responsibility and the accountability piece. And heretofore, perhaps we have not been, either as a historical or storytelling community, as holding people accountable to that, even as we sort of say, you're responsible for this, but holding the accountability, because someone may think, well, I'm going to draw a string. So what are you going to, which we heard a lot last year. If I do this, what's going to happen to me? What's going to be taken away from me instead of what's going to be given? What's going to be shared? What's going to be grown?
I want to say one more thing.
Sure.
It's easy to also view this as a wholly negative kind of thing, this conversation about this history, and it really isn't. The obvious thing is that when you finally address this history, when you look at the wounds, and we never have looked at the wounds yet, after generations, we still haven't done it. When you look at those wounds, you're pursuing the cause of justice, and that's always a good thing. And you're pursuing healing. You can't move right to healing. You've got to look at the wounds first, and then you can get to healing. So that's valuable in and of itself. But the other side of it is that this history has become very, very popular. And I don't want to sound crass in that regard, but you look at cities like Birmingham, Montgomery, Selma, Atlanta. They have embraced this history, and they are now drawing in people to their communities to look at this history. The latest is the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, and
The lynching museum.
the lynching memorial and memorial for peace and justice. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We need to have a place in this community that's front and center. I suggested the former Wentworth Museum. I think that would be very appropriate. What was once dedicated to the exalted Cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan is now dedicated to justice. You can't buy advertising and publicity. What a story. People will want to be part of that. So I believe that, one of the complaints you hear about archaeology and history perennially is that it's underfunded. It's always underfunded. It's always underfunded. This is a history that people want to know about. We've got one of the finest, and by we, I mean University of West Florida Historic Trust has one of the finest collections of Ku Klux Klan material that I know of in one place. They've got like 30 robes and hoods. They've got membership ledgers. They've got literature. They've got photographs. They've got membership cards. People want to know this history. I would love to see them do a display on the Klan, right? People will come to see that. They'll pay money to come to see that. So at the same time that you get funding for your history, which is important, you got to have it. Exhibits cost money, staff time costs money. Air conditioning in your facility costs money. So you've got to pay for this history. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to educate people. Maybe you get people in the door with the National Enquirer sort of aspect, but once you get them there, you can educate them. This is what the Klan was. And then broaden it out from there. It's not just about the Klan. The Klan was in existence here for maybe 7 or 8 years. It's a small part of this history. It's important. We need to look
But
at
this was the second Klan.
the second Klan.
The
That's
second
right.
Klan.
So we need to look at all of this history. Like I say, from 1559, when Tristan da Luna stepped on shore with enslaved Africans, to the present. Right.
And I would, again, I mean, you and I will differ on this point, and I'm perfectly all right with this. And I do not think that there needs to be an exhibit on the Klan material. I think we have done an exhaustive job with it. I do think
one of our historian friends disagrees with you.
That's perfectly all right, and that's why I exist, is to have this conversation.
We can have
because I think that it has been exhaustive, that we've had Klan museums and Klan stores and all that, and I think that that it is it has been. I do think, though, that the information is worth examining, and examining is not necessarily displaying. And to the idea of the monuments, those things are worth examining, but they're not necessarily worth displaying. And I think even doing that, I think it can be turned, and I'm not afraid of this, but I do think that it can be turned on a dime for celebration. What we saw in Charlottesville and other places, celebration, what we saw with Dylan Ruth and those souls in South Carolina, I think it can be turned on a dime for some nefarious situation. And so I don't think that needs to happen. I do think it is worth examining. I think we agree on
I would counter that you could do the same thing with the lynching memorial in Montgomery. And so it just depends on how you do it. But that's a long conversation that you and I and others can have.
That's why we're twins, and that's why we need to have these conversations, so that even folks with differing points of view around the same coin can do it, and again be shown the light of day. I think that's super important. Make sure.
I have a question. Yeah, I got one more question. I think we need to get close to wrapping it up here. So nationally right now, and I think it has to do with COVID, and before, with all the murders like George Floyd that happened last year. There's a lot of national initiative to support minority, and businesses, and so Tom, in your research of all this, racial stuff. We know how COVID affected, minority businesses, but how did all this racial stuff, history stuff, have you came across anything to suggest to kind of verbalize the negative effect of racism as it relates to minority businesses and Black businesses?
Yes, and I want to say that I'm not an expert on this. I don't know that anybody is an expert on this at the local level yet. That's one of the aspects of this. Is a lot of this history that still needs to be researched in detail. Like, for instance, Jamin Wells at the university has researched the Klan in pretty good detail, and that's something that hadn't been done before. So each of these aspects still has a lot of research that could be done. Having said that, it seems pretty clear that in the early 19th century, there were quite a lot of Black-owned businesses in the main historic district in the main business district along Palafox Street, and then by about 1910, that's over. And the suggestion is that those Black businesses were pushed out of the main business district on Palafox Street and over to Belmont de Villiers and maybe some other areas. That needs to be researched more thoroughly and more carefully, but it does seem that that's the case.
There were public calls for that from as early as the Plessy v. Ferguson, and even earlier than that, post Reconstruction. Plessy v. Ferguson, the streetcar, the call for segregated housing, there were so many, but documented. I think is that Lloyd's.
And I think we can document. I mean, if I was going to document it, I would go into the city directories and I would look up black businesses I would look up businesses along Palafox Street beginning in 1885 is the first city directory, and you can figure out whether they're black owned or white owned because they have a letter C next to black owned business. So it's not that hard to do, and just follow those trends and see what happened through time.
That we're still down there too. That podiatrist,
the shoe guy,
a tailor, the shoe, things that were deemed perhaps necessary or needed by the predominantly white community were allowed to stay. And then we didn't look at. We have not looked at even following this discussion.
And so my point is
building ownership either.
Yeah, when you look at some of the success black businesses were having after Reconstruction, in the late 1800s, and here in Pensacola, including a black bank, and then later in the early 1900s, a black hospital, and when you look at all this success black businesses were having, and then all of a sudden, like you said, in the early 1900s, something seems to happen,
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you that one of the things that really interests me, and again needs more research, but you look at that decade from 1900 to 1910, you've got 5 public lynchings of black men. You've got initiation of the Jim Crow laws by City Council segregating streetcars. Mm-hmm. You've got the initiation of what's referred to as the all-white Democratic primary, which basically excluded black participation from the electoral process, both as candidates and as voters, right? You've got race riots in 1910 after the Jack Johnson fight. You've got an influx of rural Southern workers that are coming from other parts of the South that had attitudes that were much more racist than what Pensacola had in general, moving into the community. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that period, 1900 to 1910, that to me, again, it needs to be more thoroughly researched and backed up. But it seems to me that there's a real sea change there and then you see in 1910 the black population of Pensacola dropping dramatically, and I think to myself, well, why wouldn't you leave?
And so like
they persevered.
Yeah, so Robin and I've been speaking to several of the Rotaries, about the history of black business and here in Pensacola, and so I think it's probably a good idea that you help give a perspective to some of these Rotaries on, about how all of this racism affected black business. Because I think when you look at the attitude today of all these institutions, and they may have this just in general, this bias may be that black people have never been successful, and they don't understand that black people were very successful, and it was through a lot of this stuff, violence and stuff you're talking about, that destroyed the success, had impact on the success that black people were having. And so here you are here today, and you've got all these programs for minority businesses, and you wonder why you got all these programs for minority business, and it's just, I think people need to understand, how did we get to where we are?
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the reasons that I want to have a place where this history is explored, not just the Klan. That can be part of it, but all of this history. I've got a couple of friends that
we have a whole museum for that. I think we're good on that.
We got a whole museum.
The T.T. Wentworth Museum was a whole museum on that narrative.
No, not on this history we're talking about.
Oh, this is something new.
Yeah, I'm talking about this history. I want a place for this history that we're talking about, this history of race and racism.
Oh, okay.
I want a place where you can go, like the lynching memorial, that kind of thing. I had a couple of friends who visited. One visited the Martin Luther King site in Atlanta, and he said he came out the other side in tears because it moved him so deeply. Another friend went to the Memorial for Peace and Justice, the lynching memorial in Montgomery here a few years ago, and came out the other side motivated. These are white folks, came out the other side motivated to do more, to do something, right? And so I think you're right, Lloyd, that particularly in the white community, we don't understand that there's a pattern here. When we talk about disenfranchisement today, this is not anything new. This has been going on for generations, right? When we're talking about over-policing or under-policing, this has been going on for generations. When we're talking about all of this stuff, right? Yeah. So one of the reasons that I want a place where the white community can start at point A with Tristan DeLuna and walk through exhibits and understand this history as a unit, right? That's what we're missing. And that's what other communities have already done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel there.
All right. Yeah, so I think, definitely I will suggest to some of those Rotaries to have you come in and speak on some of this history so they can get a better understanding. Because I think a lot of the folks we've spoken to or presented to, they're shocked when you hear about a black hospital or a black bank. They can't even imagine, such a thing being here in Pensacola.
Well,
and we got the receipts. I didn't make none of it
that's
up.
Right.
Either.
And black elected officials following the Civil War.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Reconstruction.
I spoke to somebody recently that was shocked. There were black elected officials following the Civil War. Yes, they were. They were unjustly removed from office, but they certainly existed and were there.
Yeah. So this topic is on forever, but
I do want to say that Diana Montoya says, "Wow, what a story!" And it is. Thank you for your comment, Diana. I think that does it permeates every part of who we are sharing this, and it may not be as big as what here with this information about T.T. Wentworth, Tom Wentworth, and the Ku Klux Klan. It may be something in your family history or in your at your place of work, this history, or something systemic that you know about that is worth sharing. And so I think that was the whole point, is how do you do that, revealing it, and the importance of sharing those stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that we can have a full perspective. Because not just a black community, not just a white community, not just a Hispanic community, just keep putting in, fill a blank in and put in lines. Everyone deserves to hear all of these stories, and they all deserve to be examined for the fullness thereof and not one particular perspective. So again, thank you, Tom, so much for this conversation, for answering my question.
Deanna just made one last comment there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me put my speckles on here. He says in 2014, the two nooses found on the University of West Florida was considered not a big deal. I was a student at the time. Wow.
Well, it just goes to show that these attitudes continue to this day in some circles. I think we got surprised recently with things like Charlottesville about how prominent these attitudes still are.
Some folks got surprised.
Some
folks already go.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
And see, that's another aspect of this history that I think it's important to understand, is that individual acts enslaving people, disenfranchising people, denying people access to business opportunities, segregating streetcars, they're all based on an idea. And that's what history shows us, is that it's the idea that's important. This idea that if your skin color is darker, that you are less than, right? Yeah. And as long as that idea is here, the seriousness of the act is going to go up and down. There's always a possibility of it flaring back up again. It's like an ember that's sitting there where a fire used to be. Yeah. That ember can flare up again. Yeah. And it's that idea that we've got to go after, that idea that if your skin is darker, you're less.
Yes. And so kind of, I'll make this comment. So kind of what my brain is sort of telling me, and it may not be totally accurate, but it's almost obvious, so when you can't continue to do the Jim Crow violence, you do the Jim Crow in other ways. And what I see happening right now is, let's say when I relate it to just the businesses and minority businesses and minority organizations, when I look at all the procurement policies and rules, they're in such a way that it's actually designed to eliminate as much as possible for these smaller minority organizations to get a leg up, and participate in all this spending. And it's totally evident by the statistic. If there's a statistic that says less than 1% of government contracting is spent with Black businesses, that's there's got to be something, flawed in that system. It's something intentional in that system to prevent, in that. And if you look at our local county and city spending with minority businesses, then there's, the needle is in the 1% or whatever, and not even the needle, it's not even registering. So somebody ought to have common sense to realize there's something wrong with our procurement system as it relates to minority businesses.
And you have to go into these systems and look at this. These systems that we interact with on a regular basis, business systems, environmental system, healthcare system, justice system. These are systems
Education.
that education system. These are systems that were created at a time when racism was the default setting.
Yes,
And
and
so
that's my point.
It's entirely possible that there's gears turning that default to racism, even if it's unintentional. And we have to go in and find out what is going on here. What's that default setting to bias, and switch it to a default setting that says inclusiveness.
Yes.
Right? And I'll bring up again the University of West Florida Historic
I
Trust.
wish there was, I'm sorry, I could just visualize a switch on a stove.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's,
I wish it was a zero and
what I
and
would
a
like,
one.
what I would like to,
Wish.
and the University of West Florida Historic Trust is not the only thing. This is, like you're saying, Lloyd, there's lots of places where this is going on. But what I would suggest to the University of West Florida Historic Trust is that they bring in somebody from the outside, and there are folks out there that know how to deal with this, to help them figure out where's that setting or settings, and how do we switch them to a default setting of inclusiveness, right?
But it's hard to switch to that inclusiveness setting, and this goes for any organization. If you've been brainwashed, that Black people are less than. And,
Well, you've got to be willing to look at the evidence, and the evidence is, in the case of the University of Historic Trust, the evidence is you've got 45 positions of responsibility in regard to history and no participation by the Black community. That is a red flag, siren, bombs going on. I mean, that's just everything you need to know that something is wrong here. And I think at heart, these are good folks. I'm friends with some of them.
So Tom, so like the way I see it, and this is, if you look at Northwest Florida in general, and you see the feelings, the racial feelings, and it's kind of split down the middle maybe, just think, if it's split down the middle, this unconscious bias, to what's, about this racism, and people don't think they're racist, but, which is a good sign, to a red flag. But the deal is how can you not run into this in any organization in Northwest Florida? Period.
I think you're right.
Well, and there are so many other isms that that permeate our spirits, and I mean the human spirit. It's unfortunate that some of these do, and some of them are based on race, some of them are based on class, some of them are we've even gotten to the point where we say, a zip code. If you grew up in this zip code, then you're, We judge people by that, or hair texture, or ageism, or what I call it all crazyism. But here's the deal, and we do need to end because it's I think we have 10 minutes left. We need a part two. In this is that if you hold someone down, if you try to hold someone down, by whatever measure or metric you're putting up, you have to stay right there with them. And in this country, we have been twin souls. To Tom's point about race and racism, we've been twin souls in this for all of our history. in this, even as we said we're starting this country to escape this what would you call it?
Oppression.
This oppression. Yes, thank you. This oppression. Then you end up doing it to someone else. So if you try to hold someone down, you have to stay right there with them. And I think that there is, just as there's enough blame to go around, there's also enough accountability to stand up and to make this right and righteous. And again, if you don't have someone at the table who is there, if everybody looks the same, then you need someone who is going to represent that. And so it challenges us all to do better, people, institutions, and systems.
And
so,
you start with you make a beachhead. You start with a place that, like the university, that wants to do the right thing. I promise you, they want to do the right thing, right? And I hope that they're hearing this and going, "Oh, dang, we got to fix that," right? And you take it one at a time. That's all you can do. You can take it one at a time, and you start shifting the whole thing over one situation at a time, starting with the ones that have the best chance of success, I think.
Yeah. Well,
and feel the fear, as Tom said, feel the fear and
Yes.
do it anyway. And again, we're talking about revealing stories. So there's enough for us in our personal lives and our families to share our story, so that our family histories can keep going on in our businesses, in our in these institutions and in these systems. So I don't want to lose that point that we started on about sharing.
And I like that approach, and the Pensacola network is about connecting with people and building relationships with people. And so our idea was to offer an opportunity for Black people to network, and people to network with Black people and other minorities, and also to build connections and relationships with the minority community and get to know each other. And so it's incumbent upon each of us, Black people to build relationships with white people, and white people to build relationships with Black people, because that's part of the reason, people that are not of color don't know, because if you never get to know a person, you don't really know. And so, my grandfather's father was a slave. Most people don't have no clue that I'm that close to slavery. And my grandfather grew up during the Jim Crow era. My mother grew up in the Jim Crow era. And so it's hard for people to, get to know people, and then you'll get to know their family history, and it goes both ways. So, and that's kind of what our point is. You don't want to do business with people you don't have a relationship with.
But you don't have to know everybody to not be an ist, a racist, a sexist, a genderist, or any other craziest kind of deal. You won't be able to know. You have to just be able to see that everybody is on this equal plane. And we're going to end it.
I want to say one more thing.
Okay, and then we're going to end
last
it.
thing.
Oh.
Until the next thing.
No, I'm going to end it, but go ahead.
It's imperative that the white community do this. It's imperative that the white community talk about this history, speak out about racism. You look at the makeup of this community, Pensacola, it's roughly 75% white, roughly 25% Black. No change is going to happen unless a significant portion of the white community is involved in fostering that change. So we in the white community have to embrace this history. It's not enough to say, "Oh, good job, you guys. I really support you." We got to get in there and do this work ourselves, or at least enough of us that we can get past that 50% plus one. That creates change in the community. It's probably a little bit more than that, but so we in the white community have to step up on this. It's not the Black community's problem. It's our problem too.
Yeah, it's like asking I've said this to a number of people, and a lady reminds me, a dear friend, a queen, reminds me of this when she said, "Well, how to help." I said, "Well, you wouldn't, if a baby's drowning, you wouldn't ask the baby, how can I help? You go and help the baby that's drowning." We know how to do this. We know how to do the right and righteous thing, and it's in our hearts to do the right and righteous thing. And so we just, as Reverend Matthew, as you said, Reverend Matthew said, feel the fear, and and then get in there and do it anyway. So we're going to end with that, Lloyd. We have two other comments. Darlene Mosley, Grant Mosley. Hey, Darlene says, great stuff. Thank you very much. And our good friend Christian Wagley says, great conversation. Thank you. So thank you to everyone for listening on Hop
Yes.
In. Thank you for listening on
Facebook.
Live. We really do appreciate it. We thank Chris Hendricks with Bantucola for helping us make these digital connections. Thank you to Mike Arbrouet. Okay, so I'm from the country cousin, Mike. And please go to his, it's in the, I think it's on Facebook Live as well, to help our neighbors in Haiti and to help Mike's effort. He put the Facebook link up there, and his Haiti cybercon.com, he put that up there as well. And keep connecting. That's what this is about. And so again, thank you so much, Tom, for this this extended conversation.
Oh yeah,
wow.
I think we broke the record for our conversations on the Pensacola Network.
No.
See what you did.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize for doing this. Listen, this is what this is. This platform is about community development and economic
And
development.
me and Robin will keep talking about this. Even
Yes, we will. Yes, we've got a ton of water and some snacks over there. Yes.
All righty. Y'all want me to get you all some Macy's fried chicken?
I certainly do.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was gonna text
please
you.
do.
Yes, I do.
Please
Put
do.
in the order now. Yes.
All righty. Okay.
And thank you to Robert Hill with WRNE for reminding us of that earlier. You're welcome, Diana. I'm sure we're getting some Facebook comments, but I can only see the ones here.
Bradley Benson says, thank you all. Yeah, and Bianca says, brilliant talk. Move period. Thank you for sharing. Rodney says hello. All righty. So thank you all, and we're going to sign off and see you next month. And we appreciate all the people that came to hop in on the network and as well. So
and next up on the we're going to have a young man who's going to talk about the new way of digital exchange. So I'm really excited. Yep. Elijah, a young 20. How's Elijah? I think 22 years. I'm looking at you like you know. Elijah's 22 years old, and so this new way of it's called NP something. It just forgot it, of digitizing things, and this new currency exchange that is sweeping the world right now. So we're going to talk with someone who is intimately involved in that. So thank you all again for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. I'm going to hit the stop broadcasting.